There's a longing in all of us, a homesickness no house or holiday can cure. Even at our most joyful gatherings, even in our most festive rooms, we feel the ache of a home we've never fully known. Yet once, on a night unlike any other, God came down, not to a palace, but to a borrowed stable, neither welcomed nor wrapped in honor, but in rags. Christ came to us homeless, so that we could be at home in God. The child laid in straw, once prophesied long ago, was pierced for our transgressions and crushed for our iniquities, so that now the place we find rest isn't in a perfect room or a peaceful routine. It's in a person, Jesus Christ. He is our shelter in the storm, our warmth in the waiting, our welcome in the wandering. As G.K. Chesterton once wrote, "To an open house in the evening, home shall men come, to an older place than Eden, and a taller town than Rome, to the end of the way of the wandering star, to the things that cannot be and that are, to the place where God was homeless and all men are at home." This Advent, join us to reflect on the promises found in Isaiah, promises of Emmanuel, the manger, and the Savior who is our home.
This time of year can move rather quickly. This time too can easily turn into almost a blur. We run from work deadlines to school concerts, from Christmas programs to our shopping list, from holiday travel to late night baking cookies for nativity nights, all while trying to keep the wheels from falling off. Seems like most years, by the time Christmas arrives, we feel pretty worn and thin. We're tired in body, we're anxious in mind, stretched in spirit. Even the sanctuary reflects that this weekend. We're still in the process of decorating here for the season with trees and lights up, but the decorations, well, they're going to have to get done sometime this week as well. Underneath it all the movement, there's this deep desire within us of this longing for the be just home. You see, I don't mean simply the physical location of home, although that's part of it, but that feeling of home. Home being defined as where that place where things are right, where you can breathe, where the striving stops, and where you are seen and loved. But if we're honest, sometimes even when we are at that physical home, we still feel far from that feeling of home. Sometimes it's the table that's full, the house decorated, yet something inside of us feels empty. We can be in a crowd of people, yet still feel alone. Everything looks picture perfect on the outside, but on the inside, there's that unrest, that ache, that sense of dislocation. That's not just holiday stress you're feeling. It's a spiritual exile. The Bible has plenty of things to say to people who find themselves in exile, especially the prophet Isaiah. Isaiah wrote to a people whose world had simply collapsed. Israel to the north was gone. Judah to the south had been cut down by their own sin and the crushing power of their enemies. Everything they thought they knew, everything they thought that was secure was gone. The glorious tree of God's kingdom had been reduced to a stump, cold, dead, lifeless, and broken. And that's not just ancient history. That's our human condition since the fall. Adam and Eve were cast out of their home in Eden, and every child born after them carries that exile in the marrow of their bones. We inherit this sin, we practice sin, and that sin pushes us far from the presence of God, and we feel the effects everywhere. A German philosopher by the name of Martin Heidegger called this feeling, and I'm going to hopefully not butcher it this service, unheimlichheit, something like that. And what that simply is that feeling or that uncanniness that kind of comes in us where we feel like home, it looks familiar, but it looks unfamiliar at the same time. Have you had that feeling ever? I was thinking about that this week for working on this message, and I was reminded of myself of a particular time where I felt this in a physical way. It was about 7 years ago. I had been invited back to Painesville, Ohio, where I grew up from the ages of 2 till 18 years old, to the congregation that helped form me and sent me off as a pastor, Zion Lutheran Church there in Painesville. They invited me back because it was their 125th anniversary as a congregation, and they were inviting some of the sons of the congregation who had become pastors to come back and share a message. And I can remember going back to Zion and going back to my hometown, seeing the homes I grew up in, and having this feeling, I didn't have a word for it, I do now, unheimlichheit, of being, quote, home, but it didn't feel like home. It had been a decade and a half since I had been there. And it didn't feel the same, even though it was the same place. Maybe you've had that with a physical location. But I'm pretty sure we've all felt this in other ways as well. That feeling of being alienated in our own bodies, living in a world that doesn't meet our deepest needs or feel our truest desires. That feeling of being out of sync or out of rhythm, knowing deep down inside of us, this place, this life, with all of its pains and problems, sins and struggles, evils and atrocities, anxieties and idolatries, isn't what we're made for. Unheimlichheit. We see this in our lives, don't we? We run back to the same sin over and over and over again. Despite the promises we've made to God, despite the promises we've made to other people, we get stuck. Then there's that guilt. That guilt you can't shake from a mistake in the past, despite that you knowing time and time again that it's been forgiven, that Christ has paid for that wages of sin on the cross, yet that guilt keeps coming back. Maybe it's a physical thing, a chronic pain that you carry. Maybe it's the feeling of that heart and soul that you poured into your kids, you poured into your career, thinking that it'd make you feel right, it'd make you good, it'd make you full, it'd make you happy, only to find that you're still nagged by that sense and that feeling that you're not enough. We chase meaning and identity and approval and come up empty. Every one of us knows the whisper, this isn't how it's supposed to be. And that whisper's telling the truth. This broken world, filled with sickness and fear and death and frantic striving, this is not home. As Moses says in Psalm 90, we said it earlier together, Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. In other words, you, God, are our home. Apart from him, we're strangers and wanderers, living east of Eden in exile. And this is what makes the true story of Christmas so amazing and worthy of our attention. That Christmas says that the exile isn't the end of the story. God is coming to bring you home. To him you have been restored. With him you have been reunited, and in him you have rest. He brings us from our sin-earned exile and makes us to dwell with him. He is our home. And this is the heartbeat of Isaiah's message and the heartbeat of this Advent. Which is why I encourage you not just to join us in our weekends for this message, but to pick up one of those devotionals, download that QR code to your phone with the devotional there as well. Be in this word in the midst of the hustle and bustle of this season. Because at the center of the Christmas story is a promise that we are and will be brought home. This slump of humanity will not be ground to pieces. The pains and the problems of life lived east of Eden will come to an end. The hurry and hustle of life where we are forced to run ourselves ragged, bouncing here and there in an effort to manufacture some sense of meaning, to prove that we matter, has come to an end. We will end in a place that truly satisfies, in the place that we belong. Into this hopeless landscape, God speaks a promise through Isaiah, a promise that feels almost impossible to the downhearted southern kingdom of Judah. He tells them quite stunningly that although they are being cut down, a new branch, a fruitful branch, will bloom out of their sad stump. Isaiah 11 declares, "There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his roots will bear fruit." A shoot from a stump, from what looks dead, from what is beyond repair. Friends, this is the Advent promise. God is not finished. He will not leave us cut down. He will not abandon us in exile. Isaiah announces a king, a greater David, filled with the Spirit, full of wisdom, of righteousness and justice. A king who would restore what sin destroyed. Carolyn read that for us this morning from Isaiah 11, that the description of a king who would bring so deep a peace, that wolves lie down with lambs, children will play with the snakes that once terrified and killed them. This is the world Isaiah describes. And this world that Isaiah describes, what do we call it? Well, we call it not a mystery, not a fantasy. We call that home. It's what you were made for. It's what your heart aches for. A world full of knowledge of the Lord, like waters covering the seas, not one drop missing. And that promise breaks into history in Bethlehem. Think about it for a moment. The Savior Isaiah promised arrives not in glory or with armies or in a palace, but in a feeding trough outside the city, to a poor, exhausted couple who themselves are travelers and who themselves are far from home. Their child simply isn't a child chosen by God to rescue his people like of old. This is the incarnate in flesh Son of God himself. He is co-eternal with the Father, the very God of very God, born as one of us to save us. Jesus entering the world wrapped in the frailties of human flesh and the helplessness of a baby, doing so in the back alley in mud and blood with cold wind whipping on newborn skin. He arrives, exiled from the comfort, outside of the city, alienated from anything remotely resembling the glories of heaven. Talk about being far from home. He chooses vulnerability. He chooses weakness. He chooses homelessness. He chooses exile in Egypt. He begins his life in a borrowed stable and will end his life in a borrowed tomb. Why? To bring you home. To bring you home. Jesus doesn't just hand us a map and say, figure it out. He says, no, I am the way. He doesn't yell instructions from a distance. He gets into the pit with us. He doesn't demand that we climb our way back, somehow perform our way into his good grace. No, he descends all the way down to carry us up on a cross. Christ bears the full curse of our exile, forsaken so that you would never be, condemned so that you would be declared righteous, dead so that you might live. He experiences the ultimate distance from the Father so that you will never be separated again. And in his resurrection, the door home swings open. In baptism, he pulls you through that door and he says, you are mine, you belong, you are my beloved son, you are my chosen daughter with whom I am well pleased. I am so happy you are in my family. In his supper, he feeds you with a foretaste of the feast to come, with his very body and blood given and shed for you for the forgiveness of sins. A reminder even now that the true home is already breaking through. Friends, you are not a wanderer anymore. You are not lost anymore. You are not alone anymore in Jesus. Home has come to you. And one day soon, you will dwell with him forever, fully, completely home. In this season, there's no way around the busyness of this time of year. The pace will not slow down. The calendar won't magically empty. But maybe, just maybe, every moment that feels rushed or restless can become a holy reminder. This world is not our home, but our home is coming. Every ache for rest, may it point you to the one who gives true rest. Every longing for peace, let it point you to the Prince of Peace. Every journey you take in these coming weeks be a reminder of a God who journeyed farther than anyone could have imagined. From heaven to a manger, from a cross to a tomb, from death to life, to bring you home. And he will bring you there. So this Advent, when you have that feeling of unheimlichheit, you feel far from home, remember Christ left his home for you. Christ joined you in exile. Christ carried you home through his cross and his resurrection. And Christ himself will return to make all things new. And on that day, you will finally, with a perfect body and a perfect voice, be able to declare completely and fully, at last, I am